Welcome, gentle viewer, to the Civilian Intelligence Report for the week of 5 July 2020. Here at CivEntRep, we only cover the stories that really matter and have a substantive impact on the lives of many Americans. Here is our event rating scale. Level 1 or 2 events are not important enough to discuss. Levels 3, 4, and 5 impact a wide portion of the U.S. population, whole regions, or the entire U.S. population, respectively. In order to describe how events may develop, we rate them currently and in the future. In order to describe the probability of our predictions, we give each event a letter designator based on our estimate of the probability of the event and the time we think it may take to unfold. This week's stories: degradation of law enforcement, COVID-19, degradation of free speech, civil unrest, and the economy. Degradation of law enforcement. Rating 4, projection 5 Charlie. Current status. Police across the country, though they cannot strike, have been calling in sick in large numbers, a term commonly referred to as a blue flu. This is due to the degraded support from city governments and local residents. The trend to defund police was further bolstered on Tuesday when New York City approved its new budget for FY21 and reduced police funding by $1 billion, which is almost 20% of total funding. A persistent elevated level of violence has been identified as the number of shootings and other violent crime in major cities has continued, with Chicago and New York experiencing the worst. Analysis. Level 4. We have determined that due to the persistent increase in violence in many major cities across the U.S., this is now a level 4. A number of cities are experiencing prolonged violent crime rates of more than twice normal level. Projected effect, 5 Charlie. As cities continue to comply with protesters' demands for reductions in police funding, this trend is likely to continue to become more severe. We have not identified any meaningful counter-movement that would reduce the negative pressure on city police forces. Uncertainties. The correlation between negative views of local populations and lack of support, and even defunding coming from politicians and increased level of violence, is quite high. COVID-19, rating 4, projection 3 Charlie. Current status. Here are the latest graphs for COVID infections and deaths. The number of reported cases continues to climb, and the number of deaths continues to decline. The disparity is clearly reflected in the state-by-state numbers as well. A study conducted by Italian doctors working at San Raffaele Hospital in Milan has found that the lethality of COVID-19 has been declining to the point that it is generally not a serious threat. The Department of Homeland Security has determined that hotter and more humid environments degrade the virus's ability to survive outside of a host. Finally, nationwide, 43% of all deaths have occurred in relation to nursing homes, some states having that portion exceed 60%. Analysis. Level 4. Despite the economic costs and restrictions put in place, the most severe impacts seem to have passed. This story has been downgraded due to the evident manageability of the disease and the reduced lethality, and the reduced transmissivity. Projected effect, 3 Charlie. Though policymakers are often slow to respond, we expect the remaining broad restrictions, even in the hardest hit locations, to be reduced over the next few months as the lethality continues to not pace the numbers of reported cases. Uncertainties. The exact reasons for the reduction in lethality is not clear, and it is possible that environmental characteristics related to seasonality could result in an uptick in severity later in the year. We will be watching the numbers of Southern Hemisphere countries over the coming weeks to identify if they are experiencing an increase in lethality associated with the onset of winter. News story: degradation of free speech, rating 3, projection 5 Charlie. Current status. Censorship on social media platforms is not new. However, the breadth and scope of it has been increasing, with Reddit shutting down over 2,000 subreddits that were deemed inappropriate, and Facebook deciding that many groups on the site focused around the Boogaloo movement would not be permitted. These online restrictions have impacted many people directly, but as it has begun impacting the presidential race, the scope of impact has increased. President Trump had his Twitch channel temporarily suspended this week after a clip of a 2015 speech was posted. A company spokesperson stated that hateful conflict is not allowed on Twitch. In line with our policies, President Trump's channel has been issued a temporary suspension from Twitch for comments made on the stream, and the offending content has been removed. Analysis. Level 3. Due to the increasing breadth of content considered unacceptable by many social media platforms, we consider there to be a widespread negative impact on free and open discourse. Furthermore, the increased willingness of social media companies to directly target elected officials raises concerns about their fair execution of the upcoming elections. Projected effect, 5 Charlie. While we do not know the intent of any of the social media companies with respect to their desire to influence the election, it is likely within their ability to significantly skew at least the perception of public sentiment and thereby meaningfully change the outcomes of many elections this coming November. They have made their willingness to constrain speech and topics that do not align with their views, and that has resulted in a shift largely towards topics generally associated with Democrat or left politics. Uncertainties. We do not know how much these efforts impact public perception and discourse. There is an increasingly diverse environment of alternative social media platforms that many users are moving to, but the net result is uncertain. It is also not clear how intentional the efforts are in regards to affecting the election. Civil unrest, rating 3, projection 4 Bravo. Current status. While protests are still happening throughout the country, the violence has again largely declined. While it is possible that protests and violence could flare up again, it is currently not a widespread phenomenon. Initial reports of the CHOP reaching an agreement with the city to disband were incomplete. While an agreement may have been made, many of the CHOP protesters did not follow it. However, the Capitol Hill Occupy protest was forcefully shut down and dismantled this week following CHOP security firing on a vehicle whose occupants they incorrectly believed had been involved in a drive-by shooting. They killed one and seriously injured the other. The rioting across the country in the first week has now been estimated to have been in excess of $400 million. In Minneapolis, it has been estimated that the cost in total is around $500 million. Analysis. Level 3. Protests and riots are continuing across the country. Other than in a few isolated cases, there is little direct public retaliation. While there have been a few arrests, mostly by the federal government, it has been balanced out by local governments not holding rioters to account. Therefore, there is a little reason to believe that the protests and riots will not continue. Projected effect, 4 Bravo. While the CHOP is being disbanded, the idea of persistent protests intended to exclude police presence is still being promoted, and violence could result as protesters attempt to establish new ones. Additionally, the success of the protests and the general lack of criminal penalties against rioters suggests that they will continue and possibly become more severe. Uncertainties. The energy of the protests could be the result of the pandemic lockdowns, and they may fade as life returns to normal. However, that may not be a mitigating factor, or could have been supplanted by other motivations. Economy, 3, projection 2 Delta. Current status. New unemployment claims have continued to fall. While still high at over 1.4 million per week, the numbers are on a steady decline, as can be seen with the following graphs. The unemployment numbers have come out for June, and the unemployment rate has fallen again, this time by 2.2%, down to 11.1%. Analysis. Level 3. The negative effects of the economic downturn have been and continue to be widespread. However, unemployment and therefore household income are recovering rapidly, so we are cautiously optimistic that things could recover relatively quickly. Projected effect, 2 Delta. If the unemployment rate continues to decline as it has for the past 2 months, it is possible that we could see unemployment return to relatively normal levels by the fall. Uncertainties. The increased debt, both public and private, could have follow-on repercussions for the economy. There is much debate regarding this point. So while we have changed the outlook to 2 Delta, a positive change, we are still concerned that it could turn bad in the future. To see the references for all of these stories, please look in the video description. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Also, visit us at civentrep.com, where we can find these reports in text form and find RSS feeds so you never miss an update. Finally, gentle viewer, stay informed, make good decisions, and have a wonderful day.